Hey everybody, welcome back to Ramen. So today's video is on umami. And if you've watched YouTube long enough and you like cooking, you probably saw a lot of videos on umami out there. There's a ton of them, but I'm not gonna talk too much about the things that everybody kind of knows, like how umami was discovered or whether MSG is safe or not. Today, I really wanted to focus on how to practically use umami in your cooking, whether it be ramen or any other type of cuisine. So when you break down the Japanese word umami, you can kind of get what it means right off the bat. It's made of two characters, this one and this one. It's basically delicious or good tasting and flavor. So umami is the flavor of deliciousness or good tasting, or however you want to say it, good flavor. So for a lot of people outside of Japan, when they hear the word umami, the first thing that comes to mind is MSG, and for a good reason. Glutamates or glutamic acid is the backbone of most umami development in cooking. But glutamic acid is actually found in pretty high concentrations in a lot of other ingredients, such as kombu, with ma kombu being the highest concentration, followed by raosu, then rishiri, then hidaka kombu. It's also found in pretty high concentrations in things such as soy sauce, fish sauce, shiitake mushrooms, Parmesan cheese, dried tomatoes. There's a lot of other things that in it and I can't remember what I wrote down. And it can also be found in the meat and bones of things like chicken, pork, or beef, but it needs to be cooked to be extracted or digested. So that's why we use it to make stocks for ramen. Glutamic acids are also found in high concentrations in things like yeast extract, which is like Vegemite, Marmite, or the dust in pretty much any snack that says no MSG added. It probably has yeast extract in there. So if you want a really practical experiment that you can do on yourself on how to experience glutamic acids or umami, here's my buddy, fellow ramen YouTuber and ramen chef, Ramen Kanashi with a tip.
ね、初めはもう見よう見まねというか、いろいろ調べて、作ってみて、そこに、MSG も用意しといていいと思うんですよ。隣に、タレとかには入れずに。それで自分で作ったラーメンを食べてみて、で、ちょっと、旨味調味料足して、そこで飲んで、それで、すげえ美味しくなったって言うんだったら、そのラーメンには旨味が足りてなかったっていう結論が出るんで、次、ネクストタイム、作るときに、旨味をもっと、昆布使ったりだとか、他の素材を使ったりとかで、旨味を補強してそこに入れてあげれば、MSG は必要ないっていうことになるじゃないですか。だからいつも最初自作ラーメン作るときは、初めての人とかは特にそうだと思うんですけど、MSG も用意しといて入れてしまえば、一回普通に食べてみて、ちょっと、ノーイナフっていうんだったらちょっと入れてみて食べて、すごい美味しくなった。そこは旨味が足りてない。多分そこがスタートラインだと思うんで、最初はみんな多分旨味が足りてないんだと思います。僕の経験からしても。
So adding MSG to your food after you finish cooking it to check your umami levels is a great tip, but how do you make sure you have enough umami before you serve your food? Well, the easiest way is you just add more MSG into something, right? Like tonkotsu ramen, the secret ingredient in tonkotsu ramen, why everybody loves it, is there's a ton of MSG in it most of the time. There's very rarely, in fact, it's so rare that if you see a tonkotsu shop that doesn't use MSG, they're gonna advertise it right away. No MSG in this tonkotsu ramen. So if you love tonkotsu, now you know why you love tonkotsu. But what if for some reason you don't want to use MSG in your food? You think it's dangerous or something? Luckily for you, there is some ways to do this, and I'm going to tell you how to do it right now. So you ever wonder why in Japanese cooking you often see things like kombu and katsuobushi paired together to make dashi? There's a reason for this, and it's a scientifically proven reason why people should do this. I'm sure they discovered it in Japan a long time ago, and then science came in later to back up the discovery of anyways, there are things called complementary nucleotides in things like katsuobushi that work with the glutamates in kombu to create this synergistic experience that bumps up the perceived umami that you're tasting when you eat these two things together. Specifically in katsuobushi or niboshi or I just realized I'm wearing these headphone things this whole time. I don't need these. Specifically in katsuobushi or niboshi or any kind of dried fish products, you are getting this complementary nucleotide called inosinic acid or inosinate, which works with the glutamate in kombu to bump up the perceived umami in your cooking. When mixed at the proper ratios, specifically 1:1 by weight, you get a perceived umami bump of 7 to 8 times the umami that you would experience by just using glutamate or inosinic acid alone. And the really cool thing about this phenomena is the drop-off isn't so steep. So even if you're not hitting it 1:1, you're at like 40-60 or 30-70, the drop-off is kind of gradual. So you will still get the effect even if your math is not perfect. Inosinic acid is usually found in the meat of animals, so you'll find them in dried fish, dried meats, and also the bones and the meat that you use to make stock. But like glutamates, they need to be cooked to be extracted. There are actually tons of other complementary nucleotides, but the other one besides inosinic acid that's kind of the big one in Japanese cuisine is guanylate or guanylic acid. And this one is generally found in mushrooms, specifically shiitake mushrooms. And so that's why in Japanese cuisine you often see shiitake mushrooms paired with kombu as well. The problem with guanylic acid is the thing that contains the most guanylic acid, shiitake mushrooms, also has a ton of glutamates in them as well. So it's really hard to get that 1-to-1 ratio balance with guanylic acid to glutamates if you're trying to do this naturally. But like inosinate or inosinic acid, the drop-off is rather shallow, so you'll still get some benefit by adding the shiitake mushrooms into there. You'll get a small umami bump. So if you are able to combine the glutamates from the kombu mixed with the inosinic acid from some kind of dried fish with some guanylate from the dried shiitake, you're gonna have a pretty substantial umami bomb on your hands. One last thing about umami, specifically glutamates in this case, is that umami has been scientifically proven to increase palatability of food when you decrease salt. So if you can put more umami into your food, you can theoretically use less salt in your cooking. I should warn you, however, that this phenomenon seems to be temperature sensitive, so it's perceived much less when the food is hot and much more when the food is cold. So it's possible, and this has happened to me actually in the past, where I create a really nice balanced soup when the soup is hot, and as the soup cools, it slowly turns into something that's just a little bit too salty. So you gotta keep your eye on that too. So those are the basics of umami and umami components and how to use them. A lot of the info for this video came from the Umami Information Center. They actually have a whole list of ingredients and their umami concentrations broken down into those 3 things that I talked about. So I'll link that up in the description below. If you have any questions about umami or ramen making in general, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll try to answer them. Thank you guys all so much for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.